Hello and welcome to Norton from Home. I'm Ellen Roberts, Harold and Anne Berkley Smith, Curator of American Art at the Norton, and today I'm going to share with you two paintings we have on loan to us from Art Bridges this year. Stella's Tree of My Life from 1919 and Arshile Gorky's Child's Companions from 1945. We're particularly excited to have these two works on loan to us because these are two artists who are not normally able to represent in our galleries. We have no works by Arshile Gorky in our collection, and the two works we have by Stella are both on paper and therefore very light sensitive, and so they can't be on view all the time. It's been fascinating to have these two paintings on loan to us because they have very interesting resonances with our collection. For instance, the Stella is hanging next to our Marguerite Zorak from Bathers from 1913, and you can see how both these artists, both working in the 19-teens, were fascinated with nature and particularly with creating an idealized vision of it in their works. Gorky, on the other hand, is hanging with our abstract expressionist pictures, and you can see interesting resonances in particular between it and three works that we have from the mid-1940s by Jackson Pollock, Robert Motherwell, and Ad Reinhardt. It's been fascinating to have these works here in the context of our collection, or to place them in this new context. The Stella and Gorky works are both archetypal examples of these artists' style at this particular moment in their career, and as such, they make a very interesting comparison. If you look at them together, you may at first think they're utterly different. The Stella, on the most basic level, has imagery that's grounded in the real world, whereas the Gorky seems completely abstract. Stella, like many artists of his generation in the 19-teens, experimented with pure abstraction, but just at the time he was painting Tree of My Life, recommitted to a figurative style, to imagery that was grounded in the real world. Gorky, on the other hand, by the time he painted Child's Companions in 1945, had committed to surrealist abstraction. In particular, Gorky painted using a surrealist method of creation called automatism, in which he attempted to let go of his conscious self and paint purely unconsciously in order to get at the underlying truth of things. Stella created his painting in an utterly different way. It's much more planned, in order to have this kind of very hieratic composition that it has. Despite these differences, there are interesting commonalities between these paintings. When you first look at the Gorky, it may look completely abstract, but if you look more closely, you may find individual elements that could suggest elements from nature. For me, if the curved form at lower left could suggest a mushroom cap, for instance. In fact, we know that Gorky, like Stella, carefully studied nature in order to find inspiration for his art. The two artists also share an attitude toward that nature, though. Neither one of them is trying to show you exactly what the world looks like or what nature looks like, but instead they are trying to share their personal take on it. So Stella, even though you recognize the individual elements in his composition, there are things you've seen in the real world. The sheer ebullience of its composition, the combination of so many of them together, is not natural, it's unnatural, and you might even say supernatural. Stella combined them in order to evoke his life and his hopes for it. He said of this painting, "One clear morning in April, I found myself in the midst of joyous singing and delicious scent, the singing and the scent of birds and flowers ready to celebrate the baptism of my new art, the birds and flowers already bejeweling the tender foliage of the newborn tree of my hopes, tree of my life." And in fact, what Gorky writes about his artistic creation in general is very similar to this. So Gorky says, "I communicate the innermost perceptions through the art, my worldview." So these artists share a modernist commitment to expressing an intensely personal vision of the world in their art. And this is the sense in which, although these works may seem completely different, in fact, they share important aspects that tell you something about American modernism in general, and modernism in general. I want to thank Art Bridges for sharing these two works with us because they enable Norton visitors to explore the complexity of American modernism in this way. Thank you for joining me from Norton from Home.